Whether you have chronic sleep deprivation or it's an acute sleep deprivation state, you will get very hungry and you will gain weight.
To sleep no more. To sleep. To sleep.
Meow! I'm Hoople's cat. In this video we're going to talk about sleep deprivation and what that will do to you in a disaster, how you can avoid it and what to do if it happens. As a bonus, if you watch the entirety of this video, it will help you cure your insomnia. So I suggest you grab a coffee and a vegan snack and let's jump in. This video will discuss the practical actions you can take both now and in a disaster to deal with the effects of sleep deprivation. In both short-term and long-term disasters, sleep deprivation can dramatically alter your ability to survive in the long term. In the here and now, sleep deprivation is a huge issue which causes numerous accidents and lots of death and injuries throughout the world every single day.
We are a nation running on empty. Up to 70 million Americans are not getting enough sleep every night. Just one night of bad sleep can lead to problems concentrating and, more seriously, accidents like car crashes. So we wanted to put the human body to an extreme sleep test to find out how it would react.
It's quite likely that I'll start to lose it a little bit.
Under the supervision of doctors at Mount Sinai Center for Sleep Medicine, ABC News' Dan Child stayed awake for 50 hours. He wanted to find out firsthand the effects of sleep deprivation on things like concentration, coordination, and the ability to complete basic tasks. The rules were simple. Dan was not allowed a wink of sleep or a sip of caffeine.
When you sleep deprive humans, they eat more.
Dan craved carbs like cereal and pie and forced himself to be active to stay awake.
This Lego is apparently for ages 6 to 12. I've kind of gotten lost in the instructions.
Dan worked out and found that his body was much more awake after exercising, but his low points came in the morning hours.
I'm doing anything I can to stay awake.
After being awake for 50 hours, Dan was disoriented and unable to complete simple tasks, not to mention utterly exhausted.
Probably have a couple of hours left in me and then we'll see what happens.
Make no mistake, sleep is absolutely required. Skipping it or missing it in the here and now because of the disaster will cause you major issues later on. Please note that everybody, including myself, always underestimates how much sleep they've had and also how much sleep they need. I'm not a doctor, but I was an RN and I worked nights for decades. What I can tell you is it gets a lot harder the older you get, both working nights and being an RN. If you're unfortunate in a disaster, even if it's a short term and a local one,
yeah, please go inside to help yourself.
Okay,
Because everybody else has, and there's no, it's not a home anymore, it's just a shell of water. And so what do you think?
Yeah, I can imagine it's very
You can ask me what I think, please don't, because...
No, I look, it's very upsetting, I know. I've no personal experience of the impact of this sort of level.
When we were evacuated in the early hours of whatever morning we are on now, I don't know what date it is, we were told to go to the leisure centre and it was shut. And I sat for an hour and a half in a pub car park in dark because we didn't know where to go. Because everybody we contacted didn't help. Nobody replied. I phoned the police, they told me they couldn't do anything. I phoned the fire brigade, they couldn't do anything. They came, 10 minutes later, the police moved my car, reversed it into next door neighbour's car, and left that, then told us they could get us out. I had to get my 17-year-old daughter out in her bare feet because they wouldn't help us get out of the house.
Well, I've got Lucy Rose here with me, who you would have seen in that clip, talking to the Environment Secretary. Lucy, what did you make of her visit here?
Just like you said, media, that's all it was. There was no real reason for her to be here, just to show her face that she's been. That's it, really.
And tell me a bit about the damage to your house, because you're not able to live here at the moment, are you?
No. So all the ground floor's been ruined. We're going to have to take all the floors up, dry everything out, and then they'd be out. The last time we were flooded, we were out 6 months, so maybe the same again.
How hard has it been these past few days?
Very. I don't even know what day it is today. It's been hard for not just me, it's the whole of the street. You know, we've all come together, we've all struggled. Even the people on the other side who haven't suffered, they've been here as well to help us.
or if it's a massive disaster that affects many nations and is going to go on forever, you will also start to experience sleep deprivation as you deal with it. It's crucial you mitigate. A quick shout out to Praxis Pepper. Thank you very much, mate, for the artwork. He is linked in the description. He sent me these lovely wallpapers and I'm going to be using them, I think, quite a bit because they're kind of grand. In this video I'm talking about sleep deprivation, not insomnia. People often confuse the two. Insomnia is not being able to sleep or not feeling that you've slept enough and not being able to go back to sleep. Sleep deprivation is what happens when you consciously or the environment around you prevents you from getting sleep that you would otherwise quite happily take. For most people in a disaster, sleep will not be a priority. Survival is. But I will say, as soon as you can, sleep deprivation needs to be made a major priority once you've survived. Not being sleep deprived going into a disaster will make your chance of survival during the disaster much better. So what happens when you don't get enough sleep? After 24 hours or merely missing one night's sleep, you won't be able to think clearly nor logically. You'll be starting to take dumb risks and you won't even know you're doing it. This is after skipping one night's sleep. If you've been awake for 24 hours, it's unsafe to drive. Think about that.
I spend my waking hours studying sleep. Lack of it causes drowsiness and leads to fatigue, which slows your reactions and decisions while driving. For example, 17 to 19 hours awake has the same effect as a blood alcohol level of 0.05, 21 hours a level of 0.08, and 24 hours a level of 0.10. This results in poor lane tracking, decreased alertness and ability to maintain speed. It can also induce microsleep, which is the main cause of fatigue-related crashes. A few seconds of this can be catastrophic. 80% of fatigue-related crashes are on country roads. So to arm yourself against it, get at least 7.5 hours sleep before driving, take a break every 2 hours, and swap drivers regularly. Travis here didn't. Which is why he's not a subject of mine, but a patient of theirs.
Authorised by the State Government, Perth.
Having micro-sleeps, where you literally fall fast asleep for a few seconds and then wake up, is a major cause of injury, illness and death throughout our planet. In fact, it's no exaggeration to say humanity in 2023 is chronically sleep deprived. Now, when a disaster happens, you're going to be in a heightened state for quite some time after the disaster is made apparent to you. Going to sleep normally and trying to stay asleep normally is going to be quite difficult. In some disasters, you may need to keep a watch 24/7 around your area. For security and safety, it may well need to be done. But please bear in mind, sleep deprivation will occur and that over time will limit your chances of survival. As you can see, all of these signs and symptoms of sleep deprivation will make survival and surviving the aftermath quite difficult. The more sleep deprived you are, or the longer it goes on, the worse these outcomes will be. Now, most experts say avoid caffeine because the next crash will be much worse. If you have obstructive sleep apnea now, it's best to deal with it. It's also a good idea to figure out how you're going to deal with it in a disaster. For example, if you have no power or if you have to move every day for some reason, can you actually use your CPAP machine? If you can't, you're going to start to get sleep deprived. But if you can, try to keep normal obstructive airway disease at bay. Now, the good news about OSA is that over time, you will lose weight in a long-term disaster, and that is probably going to help with your OSA. Are you mentally ill or depressed now? Living through a disaster is going to make all of that stuff a lot worse. But crucially, sleep deprivation will also make mental illness and depression much worse. So if you have somebody who's chronically depressed in your group, you might want to avoid them working night shifts, or you might want to avoid them working a lot of night shifts. You're going to have to adapt your response based upon the capabilities of the people in your group. Now, chronic sleep deprivation causes many physical illnesses as well. Illnesses that are kind of endemic in modern society. But this video is really looking at surviving a disaster. So I'm not really going to look at the long-term physical effects, but they are worth noting. And if you suffer from any of these in the here and now, getting adequate sleep is probably one of the things you can do to make them better. There are 5 stages of sleep. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the other one is being awake. Being awake is a critical component of normal healthy sleep. That component is often overlooked in the focus on the actual component that's missing or harmed, which is usually sleep. But having a normal wake cycle, being awake and doing healthy things whilst awake, is a critical component of having a normal sleep cycle. You need all 5 stages of sleep every day for optimal brain and body functioning. Again, in a disaster, this is likely not to be able to be achieved, but you need to achieve as much of it as you can. Knowing these stages helps us guide how long people should nap and how long they should sleep in disasters. So people who are tired should be allowed to nap for about 20 minutes, no more. Or they should be allowed to nap for 90 minutes, no more. Napping should not replace normal sleep. Humans being humans, we like to nap for half an hour or an hour. No, if people need to nap, they nap for 20 minutes and then get up. Or they nap for 90 minutes and then they get up. What happens to your mental performance if you don't sleep or you get inadequate sleep? And why is that a big deal? After missing one night's sleep, your coordination's impaired. This makes injury much more likely. After 36 hours, you're going to feel very stressed. After 48 hours, your body's going to show physical signs and symptoms of acute illness and distress. This will vary for people, but these are pretty much what most people will exhibit. After 72 hours, 3 nights with no sleep at all, your ability to survive is going to plummet. Please note that sleep deprivation is accumulative, so it's not just about not having any sleep at all. If you're shortchanging yourself on sleep, which you probably will be in a disaster, these effects accumulate. So it may not take 72 hours to actually really reduce your chance of survival. It might take 2 weeks. But if you ignore sleep deprivation, it's going to affect you very badly. Strangely enough, sleep deprivation will also make you very hungry and probably fat. This is due to hormonal disturbances that occur purely due to the lack of proper sleep in terms of length and duration. Now what happens if for fun you don't let people sleep and you slap them awake if they have micro sleeps? Well, you're doing torture. This is physical torture and it's awful. You should never do torture. There's never a reason for it. After a few days of being sleep deprived, people will confess to absolutely anything to get to sleep. It's absolutely pointless torturing people that way to get confessions. It will break them, and it will break them quickly.
In 1965, 17-year-old high school student Randy Garner stayed awake for 264 hours. That's 11 days to see how he'd cope without sleep. On the second day, his eyes stopped focusing. Next, he lost the ability to identify objects by touch. By day 3, Garner was moody and uncoordinated. At the end of the experiment, he was struggling to concentrate, had trouble with short-term memory, became paranoid, and started hallucinating. Although Garner recovered without long-term psychological or physical damage, for others, losing shut-eye can result in hormonal imbalance, illness, and in extreme cases, death. We're only beginning to understand why we sleep to begin with, but we do know it's essential. Adults need 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, and adolescents need about 10. We grow sleepy due to signals from our body telling our brain we are tired, and signals from the environment telling us it's dark outside. The rise in sleep-inducing chemicals like adenosine and melatonin send us into a light doze that grows deeper, making our breathing and heart rate slow down and our muscles relax. This non-REM sleep is when DNA is repaired and our bodies replenish themselves for the day ahead. In the United States, it's estimated that 30% of adults and 66% of adolescents are regularly sleep deprived. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. Staying awake can cause serious bodily harm. When we lose sleep, learning, memory, mood, and reaction time are affected. Sleeplessness may also cause inflammation, hallucinations, high blood pressure, and it's even been linked to diabetes and obesity. In 2014, a devoted soccer fan died after staying awake for 48 hours to watch the World Cup. While his untimely death was due to a stroke, studies show that chronically sleeping fewer than 6 hours a night increases stroke risk by 4.5 times compared to those getting a consistent 7 to 8 hours of shut-eye. For a handful of people on the planet who carry a rare inherited genetic mutation, sleeplessness is a daily reality. This condition, known as fatal familial insomnia, places the body in a nightmarish state of wakefulness, forbidding it from entering the sanctuary of sleep. Within months or years, this progressively worsening condition leads to dementia and death.
Hey Hooples, how long should I stay awake in a disaster? Duh, until you're safe. But to clarify what safety is in a disaster, if it's a short-term local disaster, you might want to stay awake for 2 days or even 3 days, knowing that you can then rest safely and everything's going to be fine because you've got work to do. Don't advise it, and if you do that, you should be taking naps. But if it's something more dramatic, more long-term, you still need to be taking those naps. But when are you actually going to get some sleep? Say your city's been surrounded and is being bombarded night and day by an enemy force intent upon destroying you. Are you going to stay awake for 2 weeks? Are you going to stay awake for 5 months? No. So you need to realise you'll have to sleep, so sleep as soon as it's safe to do so. Safety means that you are not immediately about to be killed. Once there's still huge amounts of danger, but it's reasonably safe to do so, get into a dark closet and sleep for 20 minutes, 90 minutes or 4 hours. Get to a night-day cycle that's regular as fast as you can.
Fire rescue, what's the address of the emergency?
I'm in Paradise, California.
Okay.
There's a big ass fire on Hargrange Road. There's about 4 or 5 of them. I can see flames from my window.
And it's in your backyard. How big is it?
It's just getting big by the second. Hurry. Oh my God, it's like it's huge.
Ma'am, get out as fast as you can, okay?
Go get the kids in the car now. Just go.
Leave the dogs inside, leave them water and food, and go. Ma'am? Do you understand me, Ann?
Yes.
Okay. We have fire everywhere in Paradise. The hospital's on fire. This thing's over 1,000 acres. Fire rescue, what's the address of the emergency? Okay. Hello? Hello?
On August 29th, Katrina reached a Category 5 hurricane when it arrived at the U.S. Gulf Coast, and while it weakened to a Category 3, winds went as high as 200 kilometers per hour, slamming into Louisiana and Mississippi.
So think of how tall a 2-story building is. That's how high the water was along the coast.
A week after Katrina was first formed, the devastation was starting to be realized. Over 80% of New Orleans was underwater, nearly 2,000 people killed, 2 million others were without power, and thousands without homes.
The airstrikes, the aftermaths of the airstrikes, the dead and the injured being carried out, people being treated in hospitals that are desperately under-resourced. Those pictures and the information that's coming out, it's being captured by local journalists who are living in Gaza. They're living there. That means that they're living in those conditions. Many of them have had to evacuate their homes. Many of them have families that they're terribly worried about. We were discussing this with Marwan last night. So Marwan is a father. He's a grandfather. He's had to evacuate his family from northern Gaza to the south. He's obviously very worried about his family, and yet he's going out pretty much every day to gather material, to film material, to get the news out.
Now, most people think they're just going to keep going until they drop. However, dropping in a long-term SHTF or a long-term disaster is likely to get you killed, and it's not the way to cope with a disaster. You need to optimize your physical and mental ability to deal with things as they change, and often a disaster is characterized by frequent and unexpected changes and sudden events. This is particularly true even in a local event if you expect no help to arrive. Get safe as fast as you can from imminent, immediate danger, and then get some sleep. If you skip one night's sleep, you feel pretty energized and you feel more able to cope with what's going on. I feel great. Now, your muscle coordination is already badly affected, so you're more likely to injure yourself. But the problem with that is you feel great, so I'll do another night, or you feel great and you don't have enough sleep. Accumulation starts to occur, and the very serious negative mental and physical effects start to happen. So if you don't get enough sleep, or if your sleep is enough but it's broken up into very bad segments, you're going to get sleep deprivation. And that's not the way to survive a disaster in its aftermath. It's just storing up real pain and trouble later on. You might have to if it's very unsafe. Try not to. Various studies have shown what happens when mammals aren't allowed to sleep and when they're poked and prodded and slapped or electrocuted to stop them having micro-sleeps. In the case of rats, after about 2 weeks, they suffer multi-system organ failure and die. Now that could just be correlational. Perhaps it's being poked all the time that upsets them, or perhaps it's the lack of sleep, or perhaps it's both. Either way, I don't advise you try not to sleep. Okay, Hooples, I get it. Don't poke sleeping rats, or sleeping dogs. As a full-time night RN, in my 20s, I never napped at work or even slept at work. I went to sleep at 8:30 in the morning and woke up at 5 p.m. fresh as a daisy. The older I got, the less that happened. So bear that in mind. If you can, put younger people, healthier people on night shifts. You're going to have to rotate them because they're still going to get sleep deprivation. But realise that the elderly are going to really suffer the symptoms of it much more apparent and much earlier. So if you have a schedule and you've only got 2 nights off from the night shift, stay on a modified night shift. Go to bed really late, get up really late. Don't try to go back to full normal day-night cycle. You can try to do this, but people are dumb. I've been called by managers frequently at noon after 4 night shifts, 12-hour night shifts, and they expressed surprise that I was still in bed. I will remind people who've never worked night shifts that 3 p.m. to me during night shifts is 3 a.m. to you. Now, noise is often overlooked as a contributor to lack of sleep deprivation. If you can, and it's safe to do so, use earplugs. Try and limit external noise as much as you can. Depending on what's going on, you might not be able to do that because it might not be safe to do so. This is critical for various reasons in a disaster. Blackout curtains are really, really important. It's a great prep for the here and now. Bear in mind, most drapes, most curtains, even blackout ones, let some degree of light in. When I was in the high Arctic, I literally slept in a closet because I couldn't stand a slight bit of light coming in, and I never really got proper sleep until the plane flew out of the high Arctic and normal light appeared, and then I fell asleep. Modify activity to avoid dangers. Remember, it's totally normal for people who are sleep deprived to not realize they're sleep deprived and to overestimate what they're capable of doing. Don't ask people if they want to sleep, tell them to sleep. Take sleep as seriously in a disaster as you're going to take security. This slide is entirely research-based, it's pretty detailed, and it's worth pausing the video and looking at it. I can tell you everything on here works. Okay, a major disaster has hit. Let's survive it. And then decrease sleep deprivation as much as you can, because your immune system's going to take a hit. And in most disasters, other issues are going to drop your immune system's ability to respond to infection. Mitigate what you can, when you can. Strangely enough, sleep deprivation makes pain and discomfort feel much worse than it ordinarily would if you weren't sleep deprived. Again, if you've got injured casualties, try and make sure that they get adequate sleep, no matter what's going on around you. Now, reactive depression to the sudden ending of your home or your locality or normal life for everybody on the planet is going to cause reactive depression. And this is fine, and it's an adaptation. And I'm not talking about reactive depression in this video. But sleep deprivation will make the depression much deeper, much more serious, and much longer. And you don't want people moping around, not able to function, not able to work because of depression. It's not going to help you or them survive the disaster or the aftermath. So as both a leader and a follower, and remember in a disaster you have to be both, you won't be able to see subtle signs in other people's faces about how they're responding to what you're saying, what's going on. Even worse, they won't be able to see subtle signs in your face about how you're emotionally responding to events or to what they're trying to tell you. This reduction in non-verbal communication is absolutely critical to group survival. If you can't communicate the subtle signs, there's chances of things going very badly wrong quite quickly. Add to this the fury and rage that's going to break out over simple issues, and you have a recipe for disaster. This further prevents you reacting to reality and adapting to the new reality. You could try schooling people with this, it won't work. Sleep will.
When you're sleep deprived, you actually have a difficulty in discerning the emotions on people's faces.
And reading their expressions?
Right. You have a difficulty telling if someone is happy, sad, or angry, especially if those expressions are subtle.
Right.
You also actually have dampened emotional expression yourself. So people who are less likely to smile even if something is funny when they're sleep deprived.
So I can imagine this, of course, impacts your relationships because you're not responding properly. And are you over-responding to little annoyances?
Yes, I think all of us have that experience of feeling irritable and cranky. Yes. And now scientists have actually been able to sort of quantify that and see that in action. Researchers at Penn, actually, what they did is they sleep deprived one group of people and didn't another, and then they had them do a series of math problems. And when the math problems were very difficult and people were getting negative feedback, they found that people who were sleep deprived and rested actually had the same sort of levels of sort of anxiety and anger. But when they were, but when the problems were easy, the people who were sleep deprived had much higher levels of those negative emotions. So it really shows that it's the trivial things that can really.
And there's these recent neuroimaging studies that show the science behind this?
Yes, that's true. What they're finding is that sleep deprivation really sort of amps up the activity of the amygdala, which is a part of the brain that's critical for emotional processing, and also sort of weakens activity in the prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain that is really critical for regulating emotions.
It's no surprise in a disaster you need your ears and eyes and often nose wide open and fully aware of what's going on to survive. People forget about the brain. You need a functional brain as much as you can get it working to actually really survive a disaster. So establish all of this stuff as soon as you can and as best as you can. Remember, a disaster is a disaster. You might not be able to do a lot of these things, but you can at least try to do some of them, and you can try to do them as best as you're able to. If you need to stay awake 24/7, create a watch schedule that's based on science, not on your ego or other people's egos. Use the science.
So what can be done to help shift workers and to minimise the negative effects of shift work? One of the things that might help is manipulating exposure to light. So we know that light controls these systems, that it controls your body clock. So before going to a night shift and during a night shift, it may be useful to expose yourself to bright light, particularly to blue light, which is the part of the light spectrum that the eye is most sensitive to. You can get, for example, goggles which shine blue light directly into the eye. This will tell the system that it's daytime and it's time to be awake. The other thing to do with light exposure is minimizing light exposure close to when you want to sleep. So towards the end of a shift, on the journey home, making sure that you don't get too much light into the system, because again, that'll tell your body that it's daytime and it's time to wake up. So you can, for example, get glasses which block blue light. This may prove useful in getting a better quality sleep when you do get the opportunity to finally go to bed. As well as managing light exposure, the introduction of naps during a shift can be useful. Research has shown that having a nap during a night shift improves memory, improves levels of tiredness, and improves performance. But naps have to be managed properly. A nap should be either 20 minutes or 90 minutes and nothing in between. And ideally, a nap shouldn't happen too close to when you plan to go to bed, because it will make it more difficult to fall asleep and get your full 8 hours sleep.
So if you can, put 2 people on night patrol, not 1. One's perfectly adequate during the day, but at night you need 2. And the reason for this is one of them should be napping on a frequent basis for 20 minutes or even 90 minutes during the early part of the night shift. Once they get about 4 or 5 hours away from the end of the night shift, they shouldn't be napping, they should both be awake. If you can, people do 2 to 3 night shifts and then take a day and a night off, and then do 4 or 5 days on day shift schedule. Again, your group might not be allowing you to do this, and you might feel that you have to personally stay awake 24/7 all the time. That is not going to work. Obviously, you're going to have to modify this depending on the disaster, the duration, and the group size, and the capabilities of the people within the group. So you might need to put individuals on nights. Well, if you do that, do it for 4 hours with no nap. So it's much better for somebody to be staying awake till midnight and then going to bed, and then somebody getting up at midnight and then going to bed at 4 a.m., etc., rather than staying awake for 8 to 6 to 12 hours on their own. It's not a recipe for a good survival situation. They won't be able to focus very well on what's going on after a few days of this, and that's critical for survival. They don't recommend sleeping pills of any type in a disaster or in the here and now, but if you really must sedate yourself, after night you can try Gravel orally, 25 milligrams for a day or 2. You can take melatonin 0.3 to 0.5 milligrams at night for a maximum of 4 days, no longer. If you do use these medications, you use them after the period of night shifts to get adjusted back to day shift. You don't use them during the night shift to stay awake. Now, if you have dextroamphetamines available, and that's illegal, or you have a drug called modafinil, you might think that you should take that. You may have actually taken those drugs whilst working in the military service. I do not recommend either one of them. They need to be done for very specific short duration events, and they need medical supervision. They can kill you and they're addictive. I don't think they have any place. Get some sleep. If you like this video, feel free to give me a subscription, give me a thumbs up, and share this with every single person you know online multiple times. If you don't, I will haunt you and you will never sleep again. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Toodles. Oh, by the way, this is what happens when you have a little bit of diarrhea during the night and then you get up at 5 a.m. and you find a little baby raccoon and you slip your harness and the raccoon snarls at you. He's having a serious sleep deprivation day. This video was brought to you by a very sleepy Wolfie Terrier production 2023. Now you may have to become sleep deprived, but if you can, try and mitigate the effects of it. But if you can, try to keep normal obstructive airway disease at bay.